सुन्दरमुखम् ताम्रारविन्देक्षणम् भक्ताभीष्टवराभयप्रदकरम् कौपीनमात्रोज्ज्वलम् स्वात्मानन्दरसानुभूतिविवशम् सर्वानवद्याङ्गकम् श्रीमन्तं श्रीरमणीश्वरं गुरुवरं योगासनाध्यासितं ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरम् हृदयकुहरमध्ये केवलं ब्रह्ममात्रम् यहमहमिति साक्षादात्मरूपेण भाति हृदि विषमनसा स्वं चिन्वतामच्युतावन् पवनचलनरोधात् आत्मनिष्ठो भवत्वम्। Namo Ramana. We will commence today's Atma Vicharam by listening to Bhagavan's Upadesham. As usual, I will be reading Bhagavan's Upadesham from the book Ramana Answers, Self-Enquiry 1900 to 1950, a compilation of all the answers given by Bhagavan on the subject of Atma Vichara between 1900 to 1950. The compilation has been done by our founder, President, Sri A.R. Natarajan ji. And we have been looking at the question answers between 1936 and 1950. After reading Bhagavan's Upadesham and meditating on it by his abundant grace, then we will have a 20 minutes Atma Vichara session. Following that, our President Sarada Akka would be talking about Atma Vichara as it has been contemplated in Ramana Gita by the conversation between Bhagavan and many devotees, which has been compiled by Ganapati Muni. And then we will have the concluding prayers to Bhagavan. In the connected questions that we have been meditating on, the devotee asked, why are there different paths? And Bhagavan said, the paths are meant only to dehypnotize the individual. We looked at it and we saw why we are hypnotized by this individual idea and how the path which dehypnotizes then and there establishes us in the actual self. And the questioner asks, dehypnotize me, tell me what method to follow. Then Bhagavan had asked, where are you now? Where should you go? We looked at it from the perspective last week by Bhagavan's grace. Where are we now? Only we talk about this dehypnotizing everything in the state of the waking. We have no such issues when we are in the deep sleep, and we don't really care much about whatever happens in the dream, because When the dream is happening, it all looks real, but as soon as we wake up from dream, we seem to drop the entire dream as though it doesn't matter because it is not real. But however, this waking state of ours, which we seem to have a continuity, so feels as though that is something that we are stuck with this identity of individual, and therefore there needs to be something to be done. So Bhagavan asks, where are you now? Where should you go? So the idea that I am stuck to this individual idea, individual identity, and therefore I need to do something and get out of this is what we are looking in the frame of dehypnotizing. And that we looked at it last week. And today's question answer, let the devotee asks, I know I am, but I do not know what I am. To which Bhagavan says, are there two eyes then? The devotee's question is, I know I am, but I do not know what I am. Are there two eyes then? Obviously, we don't find myself to having two identities. It is me who continues to be in the waking, who continues to be in the dream, and who continues to be in the sleep as well. However, this idea that I know I am and yet that I don't know what it is again happening to me. There is some sort of an identity with with the self, and then there is again an identity with an object of the body, and therefore when I am experiencing myself as I am, there is a lookout for an objective experience. And since there is nothing as such to perceive as an object, so the one who says, I know I am, but I do not know what I am, seems to be my identity. And if I, how can I say that I know and yet I don't know? So that is, there should be then one who says who knows, and there should be one who says I don't know. So Bhagavan is asking, are there two eyes then within you? And this problem, this question is not a simple bewildering question to all of a simple question to be put away. It's a very strong question for all of us. We logically understand when it is explained, but yet we find ourselves not to have understood. In fact, it is not only with the subject matter or an abstract matter like of the self, even many worldly things which we think we know, we really don't know. We have forgotten it very quickly. If you just see our own data set of what we know, what we claim we know, and what all we learned, I think the amount of things that we know is very, very little compared to what we learned. So there is a lot of data, a lot of things that we knew and we have forgotten. This is something that which pertains to this entity which claims, which wants to know, and yet after knowing it forgets. This is the characteristics of this entity. We have to understand this limitation or this characteristics of this entity, because it is holding that entity we want to do our sadhana. We want to know, we want to claim that we know. We want that entity to be there and yet claim to be known. And here is the classic problem of this entity that it forgets whatever it knows. However, number of times it is told, what it remembers is very, very minuscule. And even what it remembers, it may not remember at the time appropriate. It forgets it. And it may remember sometime later. So here is one entity called the ego who wants to know and whom we want to educate with the self. And there is a lot of effort put holding on to that entity to educate it about the knowledge of the self. In fact, we spend hours and hours, years and years constantly holding on to it and trying to make it get an understanding. And here it is, which fails again and again or forgets at every moment to hold on to. This is a classic problem which we have to understand. Is our effort holding on or giving reality to this ego entity and then making it get educated about spiritual matter or for that matter anything? Is this the right effort at all? Bhagavan always tells us that this ego I is unreal. Like, like the classic example that we can see is if when the dream is going on, the whole dream and the whole contents of the dream, all the world, all the people, all the languages that are spoken, all the things that were conversed is very real at the time. But once we wake up from the dream, and no matter what kind of dream it was, whether in the dream I felt myself to be ignorant or I felt myself to be knowledgeable, both of which we simply let go because the whole dream as such is seen as unreal. That we don't seem to recognize with the waking state, with this ego, that this ego too is unreal. For us, this identity, this limited identity with this name and form, with its ability to know, with its ability to do, is very, very real. So we are not able to take away this entity like the dream and say that it is unreal, so there is no need for me to even look at it. As Bhagavan often puts it as, the hair that I have cut, which have to be thrown away, I don't go and look for how many gray hairs are there, how many white hairs are there. It all has to be thrown away. But we don't look at this waking state similar to the way we look at dream. As soon as we wake up from dream, we are ready to just understand that it is all imaginary and it is all unreal and throw it away. But we don't do the same thing with the waking eye. We feel very strong that this is real and this ego has to be somehow educated about the knowledge of the self. And we are putting efforts, hours, days and years trying to make the impossible possible. The impossible because it is not something which is real. Bhagavan says the ego is not real at all to start with. And here we are lent the reality to it and hold on to it and put so much effort to make it. This begs an inquiry. So therefore Bhagavan asks us this question, are there two eyes? The one who is claiming that he knows I am and doesn't know what he really is that a separate guy, or the one who claims I know, is that the guy that you are? This is important for us to really put the question. If we don't question the reality of this entity who wants to know, who wants to get educated about the self, we could be spending many much time trying to educate it. And as we also saw, trying to educate it is also not worthwhile because it doesn't seem to remember anything, or it forgets whatever we may have learned. We may forget to apply when at the time of need. I remember my cousin, who is a doctor, saying that there was a young fellow who had joined, who had come with a stomach pain, and they did all the scanning, all the things that they need to do, and yet they couldn't figure out what was the problem. So they have all knowledge about the anatomy of the body, yet they have all the instrument for them to scan and get to know about it. But yet they couldn't figure out until it became, he started to develop multiple organ failures due to septic of the body. Then again they did the same thing, only to figure out that the intestine had got dislocated from the stomach and all the septic was going into the back of the body. Now, it was the same CT scan, the same machine, same knowledge, something that they couldn't figure out. What could be the problem? And the man was complaining of stomach pain and back pain. So, so much to our knowledge that we, even if we know, we cannot apply, we cannot do anything. And to that, and to such an entity, we are trying to educate about the self. So Bhagavan is asking, are there two eyes? In the sense, if there is only one eye, and that knows I am, why are you holding on to this another thought which is rising or which claims I know? Or why are you holding on to this which also claims I know but I don't know what I am? So, by inquiring about the reality of the entity, we see that this whole thing is as equally imaginative as much as the dream. And only when we see this I, the waking, the entire show of the waking is as imaginative as the dream and absolutely don't give it any reality, then when we drop it, what remains is the pure self. And that was the dehypnotizing that happens. The enquiry is only Bhagavan's way to make us realize the effort maker is unreal. The effort maker of who does the enquiry is unreal, and therefore, by giving him the reality, we are in the continuous mode of effort. And by dropping him and the self, the Summa, the blissful presence shines automatically as I. With the immense grace of Bhagavan, with which alone we have come to this most direct path. For the next 20 minutes, let us do Atma Vichara. Ujjwal, could you please help me with the time?
नमो भगवते श्रीरमणाय।
Namaramana, over to Sarada.
Namo Ramana. Prostrations to Ramana, shining as the self in all beings. By the immense grace of the self, manifest as Ramana, we are meditating in this section of the Satsang on the verses of Ramana Gita, and we are on the chapter 7 pertaining to self-enquiry. And we had Karshni asking Bhagavan, what is self-enquiry? Rupamatma vicharasya kimnu kim va prayojanam? What is the efficacy of self-enquiry? And is it possible to get the results of the same results through other means also? This is what Kashni has asked Bhagavan. And Bhagavan first explains what is self-enquiry. Sarvasamapi vrittinam samashtirya samirita aham vrittera mushyastu janmasthanam vibrushyatam. All the thoughts are dependent on the I thought, and to search for the source of the I thought is self-enquiry. Eshamatma vicharasya na shastra parishilanam ahankaro vidinasyat moolasthana gaveshane. If one searches for the source of the I thought, the ego gets merged there, gets dissolved there. Whence am I? Where from does this I arise? So that is what Bhagavan is asking us to do as self-enquiry. Here he is teaching, whence am I? Then he says that once the ego is dissolved, what happens? Nothing to be afraid of, because many devotees have expressed fear, including Paul Brunton in a very famous conversation where he asks, if the I thought disappears, then will I become an idiot? So Bhagavan says that it will not be any kind of a negative state, not a state. In Ulladinarpada also repeatedly he says it is fullness, it is Purnam. So here he says Atma Satyobhita Purnaha Kevala Parishishyate. The self alone shines in all its fullness. When the I thought is merged in its source, Atma bhasastvahankaras sayada sampraliyate. When the I thought, which is a reflection of the self, it's only a reflection of the self. Earlier in the science of the heart, he has already told us that it is the mind for a jnani is divabhana vivaindavam. It is like the moon in the daylight. So there is nothing, the moon does not disappear. The full moon, when it is there, it rises, the full moon rises quite early in the day. Very often the full moon rises quite early in the day, and it will be coexisting with daylight. But we do not see its appearance during the daylight, although it coexists with the sunlight. Who is paying attention to it? Who pays attention to it when it is there in the daylight? It is just merged in the magnificence of the sun's light. Similarly, the ahankara will get merged in the self. It is only a reflection of the self. So, seeing it to be a reflection of the self, we realize that it must have a source. If it is a reflection, if the moonlight is a reflection of the sunlight, when we say the moonlight is reflected light, then automatically we understand there is a source for this light. And what could that source be? That source is the sun's light. When we realize that the moon doesn't have its own light, we turn to its source, the sunlight. Similarly, when we understand that the ego is only reflected light, it's a reflected consciousness, it's not its own source of light or its own source of consciousness, then we understand it must have a source. And then when it merges in the source, Bhagavan says, the self, the source, shines forth in its fullness, in all its fullness. And in the fullness meaning, Kevalaha, there is nothing apart from it. It alone shines. The self alone shines. There is nothing apart from it. This means that when Bhagavan is saying Kevalam, everything is included in it. The I or everything else in the world is included in it. It includes and transcends everything. This was Bhagavan's experience, direct experience, when he inquired into his own true nature by facing the fear of death, by enacting the fear of the death itself, in order to inquire into its meaning, into its truth, and he found that the self is something which is all encompassing. He says it includes and transcends the body. But it does not matter. See, once it is all encompassing, once it is so infinite, then the body also is a very infinitesimal part of it. It's such a small part of it. So it would cease to matter. Its significance will completely get dissolved. That is what is the sampraliyate, which Bhagavan talks about over here. And he says, what is the use of this practice? Sarvaklesha nivritti syat phalam atma vicharatah. The fruit of self-inquiry is the destruction of all ills. It is freedom from all sorrow. It is freedom from all distress. Everything. Sarva klesha nivritti. Because he will go on to tell in the next verse that other means may give us some relief. See, when we have pain, we go to the doctor. If the doctor is able to diagnose our problem accurately and also able to give us medicine, and by God's grace, if the medicine works, if it clicks, then we get a solution for that particular problem. It is not sarva klesha nivritti. All problems in our life are not solved when we get a solution for our physical difficulty, our disease, our illness. All the problems may not be solved. Again, if we have a financial difficulty and we approach somebody, or Bhagavan just converts our situation into a positive situation in some way. There are so many devotees who refer to Bhagavan as the Swarnahastaka, one of the namas in his Ashtotra, because there is a story, literally story from rags to riches. They would have been in so much of financial difficulty and they find themselves in great financial comfort or even luxury. So you can say that Bhagavan is Swarnahastaka. Just saying his name is enough to give us all these riches, plenty. in terms of the worldly possessions, comforts, everything. But does that keep us happy? Does it keep us happy all the time? Are we free from all kinds of problems? Are we free from the possibility of the mind getting disturbed in any way at any point of time? Even say all the things that we need in this world are given to us. We don't have any problem at all. The body is comfortable, there is enough plenty in terms of finance, all the people around us are nice to us, our family is okay at that point of time, nobody in the family, no one in the family is suffering in any way. If there is such a situation, rarely a person may have such a situation in their lives, but even in such a situation, can we say that our mind will continue to be peaceful, or whether the mind itself can get into some kind of a dementia, or the brain can have some problem? What happens then? Life itself is of course not guaranteed, but even given life, continuity of life, where is the question? Nandakumarji often quotes an incident which happened in his personal life when he was traveling by train, and in the mid station, an elderly gentleman along with his son and daughter-in-law boarded the train, and the elderly gentleman was extremely restless. He was so restless, he was wanting to disrobe, he was wanting to remove his clothes. The son was having a lot of difficulty calming him down. The daughter in law was also very embarrassed. So they were having this difficulty, and somehow they were managing in the travel. And the son, as part of the latter part of the journey, he told Nandakumarji, my father was such an extraordinarily intelligent man. His intellect was so high. He knew about 10, 12 languages. He was doing very well in life, but he suffered from brain fever. And after brain fever, he has become affected in this manner. His brain has got affected. So Nandakumarji said, upon seeing that, he felt that there is not a moment to lose, to give oneself completely to self inquiry, intensely to self inquiry, because one does not know what the next moment holds in store for us. We had a lovely exercise that was performed in one of our workshops by Venkatesh Deshpande. That is an exercise of, it's called an exercise of letting go, where he gives us many options. It begins with some 16 options of what all we can do with our time, what all we can do now, what all we would love to do in life. And then in each successive round, we have to drop a few things. We have to drop a few of our priorities until we are finally left with only one single priority of what we want to do. Now, the first time when he introduced this, and and also there is one round in the many rounds where our partner may pull away something from us and give something to us from their cards, or we pull from their cards and something comes to us from the partner, and something goes away from our cards. So one of the participants, he said, I had thrown away self inquiry. I had kept service to Bhagavan as one of the important things. And I had kept my family as one of the important things. These two were there. Self inquiry I had thrown away. In the earlier rounds itself, I threw it away. I am not a self inquiry man. But then what happened was that self-inquiry came back to me. It came back to me when what I got back from my partner was self-inquiry. So when I came to the last round, the last two rounds, I was asking myself, why has Bhagavan given self-inquiry back to me? Then I looked at my card, my priorities, other priorities. Other two priorities of one was serving Bhagavan and one was my family. And then I told myself, say, supposing I get into a state of health where I am bedridden, I cannot really do any work, then I cannot serve Bhagavan the way I think. He used to perform puja, he used to volunteer at the Ramana Maharshi Center for Learning, he used to serve in various capacities over there, volunteering. And he had a thought that after his retirement, he should be a full-time service to Bhagavan over there. That was all his dream was like that. So he said, yeah, but if I'm bedridden, if by chance I get bedridden, this thought came to me. Then how will I serve Bhagwan in all these ways? How will I serve my family? How will I help my family? I can't do it. But I can continue to do self-inquiry even if I am in bed. So that is the closest to me. That is the closest way in which I can serve Bhagavan at all times. Regardless of my external circumstance, I can serve Bhagavan through self-inquiry. I can do self-inquiry. That's why Bhagavan has brought home the importance of this. And then he took it and he said, I'm keeping this slip in my wallet as my paramount duty. So Bhagavan is telling us here that self-inquiry is the answer to all ills. Now, how strongly do we believe Bhagavan's statement over here? If this statement of Bhagavan really goes home to us, that the self-inquiry is the answer to all problems, then our whole attention, our whole life will get centered around self-inquiry and self-inquiry alone. Muruganar Swami, in his song, he says, எத்தனையோ சார்பு மற்றேனோர் குளவேனும் வித்தகமை ஞானருள் வேங்கடவா மைத்த குண சாதுகட்கு உன்னையல்லால் சார்பு வேறின்மை கண்டு சாதுக்களையாள் சரண். எத்தனையோ சார்பு. He says people have so many supports from moment to moment. And of course, we think all our thoughts are our supports. Otherwise, why would we pursue any thought? If we do not take the support of any thought whatsoever, but we have millions of thoughts or hundreds or at least a few scores of thoughts. So many supports outside in life. People believe education is a support. A good job is a support. People, relatives are supports for us. Our own intellect is a support. So we think many things are supports for us in life. Yattanayo sarbu. But he says, Maitta guna sadhukatku unnayallal sarbu verinmai kandu. For the true sadhus, there is no support apart from you. That you is the self, that Ramana is the self. And to experience that self, Bhagavan says self-inquiry is the direct means. The self is the support of all. The self alone is, he says. But if we say there is all, if we say there is multiplicity, then in Arunachala Pancharatnam also Bhagavan points out that all this is supported only by you. All this is supported by the self. So to turn back to that. And in the third chapter, Bhagavan has already told us the paramount duty is to abide in the self. Here he says that self-inquiry is sarva klesha nivritti syat. It is the answer to all problems, all difficulties. Any kind of difficulty arises in our lives, we can turn to self inquiry as the solution. And it is bound to give us a solution because Bhagavan has given it on his authority. He has answered Karshni. This is the fruit of self-inquiry. Sarva klesha nivritti. And in the next line he says, Phalanam avadhi soyam asti netodhikam phalam. There is no fruit higher than the fruit to be obtained through the practice of self-inquiry. He has told us this. He is showing us this as holding out a prize in front of us, almost to tempt us to hold on to self-inquiry. And by his grace, he brings it to the fruition as well. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya.
Apara Satchit Sukhavarirashi Yasyormimatram Bhuvanam Samastam Guhahitam Tam Ramanam Gabhiram Chintavihiram Hridhi Chintayami Chintavihinam Hridhi Chintayami.
Namo